The glow of success radiated through the glass walls of TechVision's downtown office as Dylan Morgan stood before his team, champagne glass raised high. At 35, he embodied the modern tech entrepreneur, driven, innovative, and now, officially $1 million grant recipient. The celebration buzzed with energy, but Dylan's eyes kept drifting to the empty corner office where his brother Josh should have been. To the future of AI-driven healthcare. Dylan's words carried across the room, met with enthusiastic cheers. Yet beneath the surface of his triumph lay an unsettling void. Josh, his elder brother and longtime mentor, had missed the announcement ceremony. His absence felt like a shadow across Dylan's moment of glory. The brothers' journey had begun in their parents' garage 15 years ago, with Josh teaching Dylan to code on a second-hand laptop. Every milestone since then had been a shared victory: their first contract, their first office, their first successful product launch. Josh's business acumen had complemented Dylan's technical brilliance perfectly. Until now. As the celebration wound down, Dylan's phone buzzed with messages of congratulation, but none from Josh. He retreated to his office, where framed photos told the story of their partnership. Josh helping Dylan move into his college dorm. The brothers high-fiving at their first tech conference. Josh's proud smile at TechVision's opening day. "He's probably just busy with the grant committee wrap-up," Sarah, Dylan's marketing director, offered supportively. "You know how these things go." But Dylan knew better. The tension had been building for weeks, ever since he'd submitted the grant proposal for his revolutionary healthcare AI system. Josh had grown distant, canceling their weekly strategy sessions and avoiding direct conversations about the project. Later that evening, as Dylan packed up to leave, a familiar figure appeared in his doorway. Marcus Chen, another member of the grant committee and an old friend, lingered uncertainly. "Congratulations again, Dylan. The vote was close, but your presentation won them over." Marcus paused, shifting uncomfortably. "Though I should mention, not everyone was convinced." Dylan's hand froze over his laptop bag. "What do you mean?" Marcus glanced down the empty hallway before continuing. "Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but as your friend, Josh was the only committee member who voted against your project." The words hit Dylan like a physical blow. His own brother, the one person he trusted most in the world, had tried to block his success. The revelation sent his mind spinning through years of shared dreams and apparent support, searching for signs he might have missed. "That's impossible," Dylan whispered, more to himself than Marcus. "There must be some mistake." But Marcus's expression confirmed the truth. He advocated strongly for another proposal, some startup working on blockchain solutions. Said your AI concept was too risky, too ambitious. The drive home felt surreal, memories flooding back with new context. Josh's recent behavior, the cancelled meetings, the avoided conversations, the subtle criticisms of Dylan's vision, suddenly took on a darker meaning. Had his brother always harbored this doubt, this betrayal? At home, Dylan poured himself a drink and opened his laptop, pulling up the project files Josh had helped review. Every comment, every suggestion now seemed tainted with hidden agenda. The brother he thought he knew, his mentor, his partner, his strongest supporter, had become a stranger. His phone buzzed again. A text from Josh: "We need to talk about the grant." Dylan stared at the message, anger and hurt warring in his chest. The $1 million grant that should have been their shared triumph had instead exposed a rift he never knew existed. Tomorrow, he would confront his brother and demand answers. But tonight, alone in his home office surrounded by memories of their shared journey, Dylan faced a haunting question: had he been wrong about everything, the partnership, the brotherhood, the trust that formed the foundation of his success? The city lights flickered outside his window as he sat in the growing darkness, the celebration champagne forgotten on his desk. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation that would either heal their brotherhood or shatter it forever. And deep down, Dylan wasn't sure which outcome he feared more. The TechVision office felt different the next morning. Where yesterday's champagne bubbles had filled the air with celebration, today's atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension. Dylan arrived early, the weight of Marcus's revelation pressing against his chest like a stone. He found Josh already waiting in the conference room, silhouetted against the rising sun, his laptop open but untouched. "Congratulations on the grant," Josh said without turning around. His voice carried none of the warmth that had characterized their relationship for 3 decades. "I assume Marcus told you about the vote." Dylan closed the door behind him, his hand lingering on the handle. "Were you ever going to tell me yourself? Would it have made a difference?" Josh finally turned, and Dylan barely recognized the expression on his brother's face, a mixture of resignation and something darker. The committee made their decision. "You got your $1 million. This isn't about the money." Dylan's voice trembled with suppressed emotion. "You were the only one who voted against me. My own brother." "Why?" Josh's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "Because someone had to be honest about the risks. Your AI system. It's ambitious, sure. Revolutionary, even. But it's also dangerous. One mistake in the healthcare sector could cost lives. I've spent years developing safeguards, running simulations. You know this, you helped me test them." Dylan moved closer, searching his brother's face for any trace of the mentor who had guided him through countless challenges. "What's really going on here, Josh? You want the truth?" Josh stood abruptly, his chair rolling back against the window. "I'm tired of being your safety net. Every time you've had a crazy idea, I've been there to catch you when it fails. College dropout. I convinced Dad to let you pursue programming. First startup crash. I mortgaged my house to keep us afloat. But this time the stakes are too high." The words hit Dylan like physical blows. "Is that how you see our relationship? As some kind of burden?" "What I see is a pattern." Josh's voice grew quieter, more controlled. "You take risks, chase dreams, and I clean up the mess. Remember Signal Tech? Your first attempt at AI. The investors you promised impossible returns? That was 5 years ago." Dylan protested. "I've learned," groaned Dash. "Have you?" Josh interrupted. "Or have you just gotten better at convincing others to believe in your fantasies? That blockchain startup I voted for. They had realistic goals, achievable timelines. Your proposal. It's pure Dylan Morgan, all vision, no foundation." The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the conference room as decades of brotherhood crumbled between them. Dylan thought of all the late nights they'd spent in this very room, planning, dreaming, supporting each other. Had it all been an illusion? "You could have talked to me," Dylan said softly. "If you had concerns, we could have addressed them together. Instead, you went behind my back, tried to tank the biggest opportunity of my career. Would you have listened?" Josh challenged. "When was the last time you actually took my advice instead of just nodding and doing whatever you wanted anyway?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Dylan's mind raced through recent meetings, strategy sessions, casual conversations over coffee. How many of Josh's suggestions had he dismissed? How many warnings had he ignored? "I trusted you," Dylan finally said, his voice raw with emotion. "More than anyone in the world. When Mom died, when Dad got sick, when everything else felt uncertain, you were my constant. Now I don't even know who you are." "Maybe that's the problem," Josh replied, gathering his things. "You never saw me as I really am. Just as what you needed me to be." He paused at the door. "Congratulations again on the grant, Dylan. I hope you prove me wrong. But for now, I think it's best if we take some space." As Josh's footsteps faded down the hallway, Dylan sank into a chair, the morning sun warming his face but doing nothing to thaw the ice in his chest. The grant money, meant to launch his dreams into reality, now felt tainted by the price of success. His phone buzzed, Sarah, asking about the morning's marketing meeting. The world outside this room continued turning, oblivious to the seismic shifts within. But for Dylan, everything had changed. The brother who had taught him to code, supported his dreams, and shaped his success now viewed their entire relationship through a lens of resentment and obligation. As he stared at the empty chair where Josh had sat, Dylan wondered if there was any way to bridge the chasm that had opened between them, or if some betrayals cut too deep for healing. The answer, he suspected, would cost far more than $1 million to discover. The following weeks passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines, but Dylan's mind kept returning to that sunlit conference room where his world had shifted on its axis. The grant money sat untouched in TechVision's account while he grappled with the weight of Josh's words. Each empty chair at the weekly strategy meetings felt like an accusation, each unanswered text a reminder of what he'd lost. Late one evening, as the office emptied and the city lights began to twinkle outside his window, Sarah found him sorting through old project files. The screen displayed Signaltecha's final presentation, the failed AI venture Josh had mentioned during their confrontation. "I thought I might find you here," she said softly, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "You've been different since that morning with Josh. Want to talk about it?" Dylan stared at the presentation slides, each one a memory of past ambitions and overlooked warnings. "I've been going through our old projects. Every single one of them, Sarah. And you know what I found? Josh was right. I never really listened to him." He pulled up an email thread from 3 years ago, Josh raising concerns about aggressive expansion plans, Dylan dismissing them as overcautious. Another from last year, Josh suggesting a more gradual approach to AI implementation, Dylan pushing ahead anyway. "But your instincts were often right," Sarah pointed out. "TechVision wouldn't be where it is today if you'd played it safe." "At what cost, though?" Dylan's voice cracked slightly. "I've been so focused on the next big thing, the next breakthrough, that I never noticed what it was doing to us." To him. He opened a drawer and pulled out a worn leather notebook, Josh's original business plan for TechVision, written in his precise handwriting. "Did you know he turned down a CEO position at Robertson Tech to help me start this company? I found the offer letter tucked inside this notebook. He never even told me about it." Sarah settled into a chair, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's part of the problem. Both of you keeping score of sacrifices neither one talked about." The truth of her words resonated painfully. Dylan thought of their father, lying in his hospital bed last year, making them promise to always look out for each other. Had they betrayed that promise long before the grant vote? "I keep thinking about what he said, about being my safety net." Dylan closed the notebook gently. "Every success I've had, every achievement, it was built on his silent sacrifices. And I never saw it." A notification popped up on his screen, another tech blog celebrating TechVision's grant win. The comments section was filled with praise for Dylan's innovative vision, but not a single mention of Josh's role in building the company. "The thing is, Sarah, this AI healthcare system. It's not just my dream anymore. We have investors counting on us, partners waiting for results, people who believe in what we're trying to achieve. I can't just put it all on hold because my brother and I are having a crisis." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What would Josh do? If the situations were reversed?" The question hit Dylan like a physical blow. He remembered countless times when Josh had put their relationship above business opportunities, personal gain, even his own dreams. The Robertson Tech offer was just one example among many. Standing up, Dylan walked to the window, watching the city pulse with life below. "You know what the worst part is? He's not wrong about the risks. The AI system we're developing, one mistake could have devastating consequences. I was so caught up in proving it could work that I never stopped to consider what would happen if it didn't." He turned back to Sarah, his expression determined. "I need to review everything. Every line of code, every safety protocol, every potential failure point. Not to prove Josh wrong, but because he deserves to know his concerns were heard. Even if it's too late. As if on cue, his phone lit up with a notification. An email from Josh, the first contact in weeks. The subject line read simply, TechVision Board Meeting, Important Development. Dylan's heart raced as he opened the message. The contents were brief but devastating. Josh was calling for an emergency board meeting to discuss serious concerns about the AI healthcare project's viability. He wasn't just stepping back, he was actively challenging Dylan's leadership. Sarah watched the color drain from Dylan's face as he read the email. "What is it?" "He's not done," Dylan whispered, handing her the phone. "This isn't just about the grant anymore. He's going to try to stop the project entirely." The city lights continued their eternal dance outside, oblivious to the storm gathering within TechVision's walls. Dylan had thought losing his brother's support was the worst possible outcome. Now he realized it was just the beginning. The real battle, for his company, his dream, and perhaps his last chance to save his relationship with Josh, was about to begin. The boardroom felt smaller than Dylan remembered, its mahogany table reflecting the tension that filled the air. Each face around him held a different shade of concern as Josh methodically laid out his case against the AI healthcare project. The presentation was meticulous, backed by data Dylan recognized from their father's medical records, information Josh had helped gather during those long hospital nights. "The current safety protocols are insufficient," Josh's voice carried the weight of their shared history. "Our simulations show a 3% margin of error in diagnostic recommendations. In healthcare, that's not just a statistic, it's lives at risk. Real people, like Dad." The mention of their father sent a ripple of discomfort through the room. Both brothers had watched helplessly as delayed diagnoses and medical miscommunications contributed to their father's declining health. It was part of what had driven Dylan to develop the AI system in the first place, a dream of preventing other families from experiencing the same helplessness. The grant money, Josh continued, his voice steady but strained, would be better allocated to developing more conservative applications. Banking, data analysis, market prediction, areas where errors don't cost lives. Dylan watched his brother, really seeing him perhaps for the first time in years. The shadows under Josh's eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he changed slides, the way he avoided direct eye contact, all signs of the toll this confrontation was taking on him too. "Before we continue," Dylan interrupted, standing slowly, "I'd like to share something with the board." He pulled out their father's old leather journal, its pages worn with age. "This belongs to our father. He started writing it the day he was diagnosed, documenting every inconsistency in his treatment, every delayed test result, every miscommunication between departments." Opening to a marked page, Dylan began to read, "My sons argue about my care again today. Josh wants traditional treatments, proven methods. Dylan talks about experimental options, new technologies. They both want to save me, but they see different paths. I wish they understood that what matters isn't who's right, it's that they face it together." The room fell silent. Josh had gone completely still, his presentation forgotten on the screen behind him. Their father's words hung in the air, a ghost of wisdom they'd both ignored. "You're right about the risks, Josh," Dylan admitted, closing the journal carefully. 3% is too high. But instead of shutting down the project, help me fix it. You've always been better at seeing the gaps in my plans, at turning visions into viable realities. I need that now more than ever." Josh's expression flickered with something, pain, recognition, perhaps a shadow of their old connection. But before he could respond, the boardroom door opened. Marcus Chin entered, his face grave. "I apologize for interrupting," Marcus said, "but there's something the board needs to see." He distributed folders containing internal communications, emails between Josh and competing healthcare tech companies dating back months before the grant decision. Dylan's heart sank as he scanned the documents. The emails revealed more than just professional networking, they showed Josh actively sharing concerns about TechVision's AI project, potentially undermining their position in the industry. These were brought to my attention by our cybersecurity team, Marcus explained softly. They flagged unusual patterns of data access. The betrayal Dylan had felt that the grant vote paled in comparison to this revelation. This wasn't just about protecting people or managing risks, Josh had been actively working to undermine the company's reputation. Josh. Dylan's voice barely held steady. What is this? His brother stood rigid, hands gripping the back of his chair. Those companies understand the dangers of rushing AI implementation in healthcare. They've been developing safeguards, ethical guidelines. They're our competitors. Dylan's control finally broke. You've been feeding them ammunition against us for months. I've been trying to prevent a disaster. Josh shot back. Every company rushing to be first, none stopping to consider the consequences. Someone had to take a stand. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as the brothers faced each other across the table. Years of unspoken resentments, sacrifices, and diverging values crystallized in this moment of confrontation. Meeting adjourned, the board chairman announced firmly. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss these developments and vote on the project's future. As the room emptied, Dylan and Josh remained, mirror images of pain and determination. The journal lay open between them, their father's words a silent witness to how far they'd strayed from his final wish. Dad would be ashamed of us both, Dylan said quietly. Me for not listening, you for betraying everything we built together. Josh's response was barely audible. Sometimes betrayal looks a lot like love from the other side. They left the boardroom separately, each carrying a different kind of burden. Tomorrow's vote would determine the fate of the AI project, but something far more precious hung in the balance, the last threads of a brotherhood that had once seemed unbreakable. The night after the board meeting, Dylan found himself standing in his father's old study, where nothing had been moved since his passing. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he ran his fingers along the spines of medical textbooks, each one annotated in his father's careful handwriting. The room still held echoes of late-night conversations, of a family that once knew how to talk through its differences. In the corner, a photograph caught his eye, Josh and Dylan at their first science fair, proud grins beneath a banner declaring, "The future of medicine." Josh had spent weeks helping Dylan perfect his presentation on computer-assisted diagnosis, even though it meant missing his own basketball practices. The memory stirred something in Dylan, prompting him to pull out his laptop. Opening the original code for the healthcare AI, he began to read through it line by line, this time through his brother's eyes. Hours passed as he traced the development of their dream, seeing not just the brilliance of the innovation, but the shadows of risk that Josh had tried to warn him about. Dawn was breaking when Sarah found him, surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. "You've been here all night," she observed, taking in the scattered papers and red-rimmed eyes. "I think I understand now," Dylan said quietly, gesturing to his notes. Josh wasn't just being cautious, he was seeing what I refused to. Look at these early test results. The AI's learning patterns, they mirror the same medical oversights that complicated Dad's treatment. We were so focused on making it work that we didn't see we were encoding the very problems we wanted to solve. Sarah settled into a nearby chair, her expression thoughtful. "So what are you going to do about it?" Dylan turned to his laptop, pulling up a new document. "I'm rewriting the proposal. Not to abandon the project, but to transform it. Instead of replacing human judgment, we make the AI a partner in the diagnostic process. Build in the kind of checks and balances Josh always advocated for." His fingers flew across the keyboard as years of brotherhood and innovation merged into a new vision. "Remember what Josh always said about Dad's treatment? That the problem wasn't any single decision, but the gaps between different specialists, different systems. We don't need an AI that makes perfect decisions, we need one that helps bridge those gaps." The morning light strengthened as Dylan worked, illuminating family photos on the walls, holidays, graduations, hospital visits. Each image a reminder of the bond that ran deeper than any business disagreement. A soft knock at the door interrupted his flow. Marcus stood there, looking uncomfortable. "Dylan, there's something else you need to see." He handed over another folder, this one containing older documents, correspondence between Josh and medical ethics boards, dating back to their father's illness. As Dylan read, his hands began to shake. Josh hadn't just been raising concerns about the AI project, he'd been advocating for systemic changes in medical technology implementation, using their father's case as a catalyst for reform. His communications with competing companies weren't betrayal, they were part of a larger effort to establish industry-wide safety standards. "He was trying to protect everyone," Dylan whispered, the weight of his misjudgment settling heavily on his shoulders. "Not just our company, but every patient who might rely on this technology. And I made it about personal loyalty." Sarah squeezed his shoulder gently. "It's not too late to make it right." Dylan stood, gathering his notes and their father's journal. "The board votes in 2 hours. I need to talk to Josh first." He paused at the door, looking back at the childhood photo of two brothers who once believed they could change the world together. "Dad always said the hardest part of healing isn't finding the cure, it's learning to trust the process." The drive to Josh's house felt both endless and too short. Dylan rehearsed his words, knowing they needed to bridge more than just professional disagreement. This was about trust, respect, and the courage to admit when love takes forms we don't immediately recognize. Josh's car was in the driveway, but as Dylan approached the front door, he noticed something unusual. Through the window, he could see his brother surrounded by his own pile of papers and presentations, working with the same intensity they'd inherited from their father. On the wall behind him hung a framed picture Dylan had never seen before, their father in his hospital bed, both brothers beside him, all three smiling despite the circumstances. The moment of truth had arrived. Dylan raised his hand to knock, carrying not just a revised proposal, but the hope of rebuilding something far more precious than any business venture. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the porch, reminiscent of all the times they'd stood on opposite sides of a divide. But this time, Dylan came not with demands or accusations, but with understanding, and perhaps the first steps toward healing. When Josh opened the door, the morning light caught the silver threading through his hair, premature gray their father had also carried, earned from years of bearing others' burdens. The brothers stood in silence, each holding their respective documents, mirror images of dedication and exhaustion. "I saw the lights on in Dad's study," Josh said quietly, stepping aside to let Dylan in. "You always did your best thinking there." Dylan entered the familiar space of his brother's home office, now transformed into a war room of research papers and ethical guidelines. On Josh's desk sat their father's old stethoscope, a reminder of the legacy that had shaped both their paths. "I read your correspondence with the ethics boards," Dylan began, his voice soft but steady. "All those nights you missed family dinners, those weekend meetings I assumed were about competitors, you were building a framework to protect patients." Josh sank into his chair, the weight of secrets finally lifting from his shoulders. "After Dad, I couldn't sleep. Kept seeing the same patterns repeating, brilliant innovations rushed to market without proper safeguards. I couldn't let our technology become part of that cycle." Dylan spread his revised proposal across the desk, watching his brother's expression shift as he recognized familiar elements woven into new configurations. "You were right about the risks, but wrong about handling them alone. Look at what we could build together." The brothers bent over the documents, their shadows merging on the wall as morning light strengthened. Dylan explained his vision for a collaborative AI system, one that preserved human judgment while addressing the systemic gaps that had plagued their father's care. Josh's technical concerns met Dylan's innovations, their different perspectives finally working in harmony rather than opposition. "It's not just about the technology," Josh said, touching a photo of their father. "Every time I looked at our original AI model, I saw the same blind spots that delayed Dad's diagnosis. I couldn't bear the thought of other families going through that because we moved too fast. And I couldn't bear the thought of families suffering because we moved too slowly, Dylan replied. But maybe we were both missing the point. Dad's journal entry about us facing things together, he wasn't just talking about his illness. Hours passed as they refined the proposal, their old rhythm returning naturally. Josh's practical wisdom tempered Dylan's visionary leaps, while Dylan's innovation challenged Josh's cautious boundaries. When Sarah arrived to remind them of the board meeting, she found them sharing coffee from their father's old medical school mug, heads bent together over a complex diagram. The boardroom felt different this time as Dylan presented their joint vision. The AI healthcare system would pioneer a new approach, not replacing human medical judgment but enhancing it, with built-in ethical frameworks and collaborative safeguards that Josh had championed. The competing companies he'd contacted were now potential partners in establishing industry standards. This isn't just about tech vision anymore, Josh added, standing beside his brother. It's about creating something that honors every patient's right to both innovative care and proven safety measures. Something Dad would have been proud of. The board's vote was unanimous. As celebrations erupted around them, Dylan noticed Josh slip away to their father's old office. Following him, he found his brother holding their childhood science fair photo. "Remember what you said that day?" Josh asked, not turning around. "That someday we'd build something that would help doctors make better decisions. And you said we had to make sure those decisions never forgot the human cost," Dylan completed the memory. "We were both right." Josh finally turned, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to share my concerns from the beginning. Fear of losing another family member to medical oversight, it made me lose sight of the family I still had." Dylan reached for their father's journal, opening it to a page they hadn't read before. "Last entry," he said softly. "Written the night before his final surgery. Watched my boys arguing about my treatment again today. They're so alike, both carrying the weight of the world, both trying to protect everyone but themselves. I wish I could tell them that their greatest strength isn't in their brilliant minds, but in their unwavering dedication to each other." The brothers stood in silence, letting their father's words wash over them. Outside, the city hummed with life, unaware that within TechVision's walls, a revolution in medical technology was being born, not from one brother's vision or the other's caution, but from the perfect balance of both. "We have a lot of work ahead," Josh said, straightening his shoulders with new purpose. Dylan smiled, recognizing the familiar determination in his brother's stance. "Together this time. No more solo missions or secret crusades. Deal?" Their handshake felt like coming home, like young boys making plans to change the world, like sons honoring their father's legacy, like brothers remembering that some bonds run deeper than any professional disagreement. "Deal," Josh agreed, and in that word lay the promise of not just a business partnership rebuilt, but a brotherhood restored, stronger for having been tested, more precious for having been nearly lost.